Luke 14 is often ignored because of Luke 15. Luke 15 has 3 parables in it that are pretty famous: the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost boy. Actually, boys. But Luke 14, nobody pays attention to it. And it starts out with Jesus at somebody's house for Sabbath lunch. It's a house that's in a nice neighborhood, maybe a gated community. The cars in the driveway are the kind of cars that I would drive by and think, man, I wish I had that car. I've got my little 4-cylinder Subaru that gets me everywhere, but I have church members in the church that I'm at now. Most of them are doctors, and when I go to their house for lunch, I peek in their garage and I think, man, I wish I had that car. And so Jesus is there, and all of his rich friends that have invited him are there. And the first thing we find out in the story is that somebody sneaks into lunch that's not supposed to be there. Your Bible will say he had a disease of swelling, or he had palsy. Whatever it was, it sounds like it infected him so that he was all puffy and sick. And puffy, sick people don't get invited to lunch at these people's house, because puffy, sick people are not blessed by God. Obviously, God has overlooked them. They're cursed by God. They're not supposed to be there. They're not welcome. There's no seat at the table for puffy, sick people. Jesus looks at this guy and he sees that they see that he snuck in. And he challenges them. And he says, what do you think? Should I give this guy some peace? Should I heal him? When Jesus asks questions, people learned a long time ago, don't answer. Just wait for him to say the answer. He heals the guy leaves, and then Jesus starts to lecture the crowd. He starts to lecture the people around the really nice table with the big fruit basket and all of the lentil loaf and whatever else was there, possibly Big Frank's. And he says, you guys, when you have a lunch like this, everybody sitting around the table is driving a Tesla. How about you start inviting people that you would never invite? People that are not behind the gated community. How about you start inviting people a different color than you? Maybe. Or people that are in a different tax bracket than you, or people that are from a different religion than you, or people that do things a little differently than you. Stop inviting your friends to these things and start inviting people that you wouldn't think to invite. Well, they're scratching their heads. They're, really? Can we just eat the lentil loaf? And then Jesus goes on. Yeah, there was this guy, he wanted to throw a party. So he invited all his friends, and most of his friends weren't really that good of friends. So he decided, I'm going to go invite other people. So he invited some other people, and the servants that went out to invite the other people said, we're not getting enough people. There's still more food, and we need to, get these Big Franks out of here. And so Jesus says in Matthew, switching chapter, same story, in Matthew 22, Jesus says, go and get everybody, and this is what he says, and this is crazy. Go invite the righteous and the wicked and fill my hall. What? Wicked people can sit and eat with Jesus? Okay. So he gets done lecturing them, and he gets done telling them, this is how it needs to be. The very next chapter, chapter 15, starts with, no lie, all the people that were grumbling, that had invited him over to dinner and had seen him heal the guy, and all the people that heard the lecture about who you should sit and eat with. In Matthew chapter 15, the whole chapter starts with them grumbling about who Jesus sits and eats with. Seriously. He just gets done telling them. And the first thing they do is, can you believe who he's eating with? And it describes the people, tax collectors and sinners. That word sinners there is specifically speaking to people with sexual sin in their life. Jesus is eating with them, not behind the gated community, not by the garage with the Teslas. These other people. And they're grumbling. And Jesus is like, oh, you people are so dumb. Okay, I'm going to tell you 3 stories. There was this lost coin, and there was these lost sheep. And then he gets to the one that everybody preaches about, including me today. The lost son. Son's, 14, 15 years old. I hate it here. You never let me do anything. All my friends get to do this, and you always say no. And I hate your rules. And I'm running away. And I want my inheritance. Now, when do you get an inheritance? After somebody dies. So basically he's saying to his dad, you're dead to me. Now, if my son, when he was 14 or 15, he's 21 now, but when he was 14 or 15, if he would have done that to me, I can tell you what would have happened. There'd be a new one. I'm still bigger than him. Not this father. This father goes, oh, you want to run away? Okay. Let me sell off a bunch of stock. I'll get all the money and I'll just give it to you. And he does. And the kid goes off into the far country. And he does things with the money. Things. The older brother calls it out later on in the parable. You know what he does with the money? The Greek word for what he does for the money is porneia. Let's decipher this. Porneia. He does disgusting things with this money. I mean, he's just not going out to eat and bringing all his friends to Taco Bell. Order more tacos. Dad's made me rich. He's gross. He does all those things that happen in the secret, in the dark, that nobody likes to talk about, except for the people that like to talk about them, I guess. So you know the story. He runs out of money and he comes to his senses, the Bible says, and he decides to go back home and ask Dad for a job. And the merciful thing for the dad to do would have been to say, okay, you can be a servant until you earn your keep. That would have been the merciful thing for the dad to do. In that culture, this boy should have never went home. In fact, here's what was supposed to happen in that culture. Here's what's supposed to happen. First of all, what you need to know is when this boy leaves and dad is set up in the parable as the rich guy in town, it doesn't just hurt the dad's bank account, it destroys the economy. Everybody in town is affected by this boy's selfishness. Everybody is. The stock market plummets, the house prices, people can't pay their rent, bad stuff happens. The whole town is affected. So here's what's supposed to happen. When the boy gets back to town, he gets to the edge of town, he's gonna ask Dad for a job. And he starts walking toward the house. As he's walking toward the house, the children in town who are outside playing would see that he's back and they would start to sing. And they'd get little rocks and they'd start throwing them at him when he's walking. The fool is back in town. The fool is back in town. Look, everybody, the fool is back in town. And they would do this, throwing rocks at the boy, and they'd be dancing around him. And this is what would happen in this culture at that time if this was really going to happen. As the children started getting more and more attention, the adults would start to see what would happen, and they would see this kid that ruined their economy, ruined their lives, and they would start to gather and they would sing the song too. The fool is back in town, the fool is back. Look, everybody, the fool is back in town. And they would grab this kid and they'd take him to the center of the town where the court happened, and they would put him in front of everybody. And then one of the elders would come out from the town, and he would have a pot in his hand, a big, huge ceramic pot, and he'd hold it like this. And together, the town would yell, "Kazaza, kazaza, kazaza." Ask me what that means. I don't know. They would yell, "Kazaza, kazaza, kazaza," and then they'd smash the pot at his feet, and then they would take him to the edge of town, and they would say, "You can come back and live with us when you've earned all the money that you took, plus interest. Then you can come back and you can be in this town." And they'd kick him in the hind end and make him go somewhere until he plied his trade so that he earned the money back. That's what's supposed to happen in this case. That's not how Jesus tells the story. Jesus tells the story that the Father sees the Son, and the Father runs to the Son to greet him. Why? Now, I want you to understand that in that day and age, men didn't wear pants like I'm wearing. They wore, like, I guess what we would describe as a long dress. Old men never run. It's a sign of senility and that you're a little bit crazy. And here the Bible gives us this picture of this old man. If you had to run from somebody, you would grab your dress, you'd pull it up in between your legs like this so that your legs were bare, and you'd run. And the Bible shows this picture of this old man who has lost his mind running through town to get to his son. Why? Why is Jesus telling the story like this? Because when the old man is running, nobody's looking at the son. Everybody's looking at the old man acting the fool. And according to what these ancient civilizations have recorded, when these kinds of weird things happen, people would have started pointing and laughing at the old man. The old man was trying to save his son from the church. From all the people that did all the right things, he's trying to save his kid. So he'll do something to get them distracted so he can get to the kid first before the church can hurt him. But the story doesn't even end there. Tuck the prodigal son under your lip, just right there. My mom was a single mom. She wasn't always a single mom, but she became a single mom. And she raised me and my sister, and she did the best she could. It was hard for her. She didn't have a great job. We were not rich. We were not middle class. I remember standing in line they had these little government stations outside of Seattle where I grew up, where poor people could stand and the government would give you cheese and bread and stuff like that. And I remember as a kid standing in those lines and my mom receiving that food. Mom was faithful though, went to church every weekend and did her best. She hit me when she thought she needed to hit me, and it didn't hurt because I was bigger than her by the time I was in 4th grade, but, she did her best. One summer, my going into 9th grade year, my mom was gone every single weekend. She just wasn't home. And we knew that she was going over from Seattle to Walla Walla, where my aunt and uncle lived. And she was visiting with my aunt and uncle. And we kind of thought it was weird that she was gone every weekend because My aunt and uncle are cool, but they're not that cool. And so, why is she going over there? Toward the end of the summer, she sits down and she tells us why. She says, Mark, Lori, I just want to make this announcement. I want to let you know, because I just want to let you know I'm getting married. And we're like, why? Aren't we enough? I'm getting married. Oh, and his name is Donald, and he's so wonderful, and I just love him. Mom, who is this guy? I mean, tell us about him. And she starts to go into her description. Now, kids, I don't want you to get too upset here, but Donald is in prison. And we're like prison? She goes, the state prison at Walla Walla. Is he a guard? No. He's an inmate. Mom, he's an inmate. How long has he been there? And she goes, let me see if that would be, 18 years. He's been in prison for 18 years. What did he do? Well, kids, he won't tell me. Maybe in the transparency of a marriage relationship, you should know what somebody did to be in prison for 18 years. She never found out. Till the day she died, she never found out. I found out after she died. I started doing my digging after he died, and she died. One day, he was at home. He was between 20 and 21 years old. He was at home in Vancouver, Washington, which is on the border between Oregon and Washington. And a 41-year-old lady knocked on his door. She was there from the Lutheran church to hand him a religious tract, to ask him if he wanted to come to church. He was the only one home. He beat her. He raped her. He strangled her. Then he stabbed her a whole bunch of times, put her in the back of the family truck, took her out beside a dirt road and dumped her body. Came back home. By the time he got back home after all of that, his mom had gotten home. There was blood all over the place. She goes, oh no, something happened to my Donald. And she called the cops. They were there when he pulled up, and they said, what happened? And he just told them. His sentence was 20 years to life. This was going to be my new stepdad. My mom tells us as much as she knew about him, and she said, next weekend you're going to go and visit him. So she got us all dressed for the next weekend, and we went to the Walla Walla State Penitentiary, and she took us behind all these walls where all the guards were, and they, did that and everything, and sat us in this room, and there we were waiting for our new stepdad, Donald. Oh boy. He comes through the room. Guy was bigger than life. He lifted weights in prison, which I guess is a really smart idea. And he just 265 pounds, 6'3", just big muscles and tattoo and that said born to, and then it was all green and fleshy. And I said, what happened there? And he goes, I didn't like what it said, so I could carve at it, and pretty soon you couldn't read it anymore. I said, you carved at it? He goes, yeah. We had a weird visit, got home. My mom started making my sister and I write letters along with her to the parole board in the state capitol. Please let Donald out. He promises not to do whatever he did again. Love us. 5 months later, the parole board goes, okay, he seems like a decent guy, and they let him out of jail. He goes to a halfway house for 30 days. In this halfway house for 30 days, he learned to assimilate back into society, which he never did. And they let him go. And my mom and stepdad got married right there. And after they got married, they went for their 2-day honeymoon, Holiday Inn on 128th Street and I-5. And then came home, and we had a new stepdad. Now, without going into a whole bunch of raunchy detail, which I don't like to glory in, up to that point, even by the time I was in 8th and 9th grade, I was already making decisions that were poor for my life. I was raised by my friends. I had a single mom, and she tried to raise us, but honestly, I was raised by my friends. And so we were doing things that we had no business doing, mostly having to do with all kinds of substances that we were able to get our hands on. And so by the time he got into the family, things were already kind of spiraling out of control for me. And my mom had put me in an Adventist school. She was thinking that was going to turn me around. But, when you got your neighborhood friends and stuff, and it's a day school, you go home, you spend, I don't know, it didn't turn me around. So my stepdad gets into the house. And for the first couple of weeks, it was okay. I mean, we were nice to each other-ish. And then my sister and I became teenagers. Teenagers, I think, were put on earth by God to irritate adults. And my sister and I were really good at that. In fact, we would, he had everybody has a fuse, and we just like to light people's fuses and watch. And I'm still a little bit like that. I'm 57 years old, but Greg, who was asking if I was here? Huh? Yeah, Don was asking if I was here because he didn't see me, and so I said, no, I'm at the airport. What, am I supposed to preach again this afternoon? And there may have been a heart attack, I don't know. Yeah. So we would light this fuse, and my stepdad would get angry, and he'd start to lose it, and we'd always run out of the house and kind of time it right, and my poor mom would be there, it's okay, they'll be gone when they're 18. And we were getting on his nerves. There's no doubt we were, but we were just being normal teenagers. We weren't being like horrible teenagers, I don't think. And it wasn't long before we found out the kind of person he really was and why he got put in jail in the first place. And again, without going into brutal detail, things got really, really rough at home. The physical abuse, the mental abuse, anger, it got really, really hard. When my sister was 13 and I was 15 is when this was all happening, and my sister and him got in an argument one summer afternoon, and he just turned around and just clocked her. I mean, right in the face, in the nose, blood. She left. Never came home again. And where she went is not a place that any parent would choose. But that's her story, and I'll let her tell it sometime if she wants to. I stayed because I was worried about my mom. I didn't want him to do anything to her. And that was life. I didn't think it was really that abnormal because I had friends in my neighborhood that had abusive parents, and so it was like, okay, what else? So I'm sitting at school, and I had been in trouble in the principal's office multiple times for doing things that I wasn't supposed to do. There had been rumors that the principal had asked me about of things that I was doing at home with my friends that I always denied. They were true rumors, but I denied them. And I was kind of the black sheep in the school. I had poor grades. I was always in trouble. I know my mom could no way pay that bill. And now this situation, it was just going from bad to worse. And then one day, I was sitting in English class, and Mrs. Tate, our English teacher, stood up and said, all right, kids, and she's looking around, and then she just looks at me, and she goes, we're not going to have English class today. Everybody, there's a soccer ball in the other room. Grab the soccer ball, go out and kick the soccer ball around. Everybody's like, yes. So we all get up, and she says, Mark Witas, except for you. And I'm like, shoot, what did I do? I started thinking, I'm in trouble for something. I don't know what it is, but I know I probably did it, so I got to start making up a lie to. Everybody leaves. She grabs me, and she brings me into the conference room that was beside the principal's office, behind these offices in the little Adventist school that I was going to. And she sits down, and she looks at me, and she said, I want to know what's going on. And again, I'm thinking, what I do. I promise he started it, And she said, at home. I want to know what's happening in your home. I want to know now. I said, why? I'm seeing some things. I don't know what she saw that particular day. It could have been a black eye. It could have been a fat lip. It could have been, me limping around or something. I said, nothing going on. Nothing. Mark, tell me what's going on at home. You have a new stepfather, right? Yeah, it's fine. It's all right. Leave me alone. I want to play soccer, my friends. You're not leaving this room until you tell me what's going on. She just kept pressing and pressing and pressing, and it was like 40 minutes into it. And I lost it. I got angry and I got sad, and I just lost it. And I started to yell at her. Mr. Beam, the principal, comes up, everything okay in here? I lost it. Fine, you want to know what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. This is from his fist. This is from me going through a door without using a doorknob. And I just went on and on and on. I just poured my guts out on that table. She wants to know, I'm going to give her every last detail. And I gave her every last detail. Even told her where my sister was. She didn't say anything while I was yelling. She just nodded, cried. Then she reached down and she grabbed her purse and she put it up on the counter and she opened it up. She took her keys out. She took a key off. She put it on the table. She slid it over to me. And she said, "This is a key to my house. I live a half a mile away from you. I know you have a bike. Come stay with us. We'll have the bedrooms ready for you. My little daughter already thinks you're great." She had a little girl that for some reason thought I was monkey bars. I already told my husband this is probably going to happen. Come with us. I did. She saved my life. She liked me. Not very many people liked me. She did. And she loved me. She and her husband became my family, and they changed my life. When I became a pastor at my first church, she became my head elder. When I got married, her husband stood up for me at my wedding. He said he wanted to give me away. I said, "That's what they do with the bride, not the groom." They gave me a seat at the table. She got in trouble at school. for always defending me. But she gave me a seat at the table. The father is so excited that he ushers the son back. He gave the son some shoes, and he gave him a ring, and he gave him a robe. And then he decides to have this huge party for him. So he orders that the fatted soybean be killed, and they do that, and they put a big spread out there, and the party starts. And for you to know, again, culturally, what's supposed to happen there is that the family is there at the table with the dignitaries of town, and the honored guest, who is the son who has returned, is there, and he is supposed to be honored by the rest of the family. The only thing we know about the rest of the family is that there's an older brother. Older brother hears the commotion from the fields that he's working, which he did every single day, and he runs in and he says, "Hey, what's going on in there?" And somebody says, "Oh, they're having a big party. Your brother came back." And they're having a party for him? Yeah, they're having a party for him. Where's the fatted soybean? I just milked it this morning. Well, it's on the table and they're eating it. At this point, the son is supposed to run in, stand behind the father and the son, and serve everybody until everybody is served, and then there's a seat for him at the table also. That's what's supposed to happen. But that's not how Jesus tells the story. Jesus says the son refuses to go in. Well, what's supposed to happen now when the son refuses to go in is the dad is supposed to tell two of his servants, "You go get that miscreant of a kid, and you bind him up, and you throw him into the shed, kick him a couple of times, and afterward I'll deal with him." The last thing that's supposed to do is for the father to play the fool. Playing the fool would mean the father gets up, leaves the table, and he goes out to reason with the older son. The older son, "I am not going in there if he's sitting at the table." And the father's like, "Man, this is my table. And I got all kinds of people in there that you don't like. But I want you to come in too." The older son is the church. The older son is the church. And the parable doesn't end. We have no ending. That's how it ends. The church is deciding whether it wants to join all these other people at the table. Do we go in and sit with Jesus, or are we just happy with ourselves? God help us. Just recently in the church that I started at, just 2 months ago, we've had 2 couples start to come to church that don't look like all the other couples. And I had a concerned church member come up to me and say, "Do we want them here?" One of them has children. What are we supposed to do about that? Wait, this is kind of more. What do you mean, what are we supposed to do about that? Who don't you want sitting at the table with Jesus? I mean, name that person, name their sin, name that habit. Who is it that you don't want sitting at the table with Jesus? Who's not welcome? I can tell you, Jesus isn't going to stand at the door of any church and say, "Don't come in here." Actually, he might, because he might say, "Because it's not safe." Who don't we want sitting at the table with Jesus? I was no candidate for baptism when Mrs. Tate grabbed me and said, I love you, I want you at my table, I want you in my home. The people that Jesus was hanging out with, they were no candidates for spiritual superstardom. They would have never been invited into the house with the Teslas. I mean, these people had sexual sin. They were cheats. There were all kinds of non-normative behavior going on in there. And this is who Jesus had at his table. And the older brother just sits there and he contemplates, boy, do I want to go in with them or not? God help us. 2 Thanksgivings ago, at my house, here's what the table looked like. At the head of the table was my dad, who adopted me. I was 5 weeks, first 5 weeks of my life were in foster care. He adopted me out of foster care, he and my mom, the ones that divorced, and my mom married the murderer. He's at the front of the table. I took care of him the last 12 years of his life. He died January 1, just recently. He sat at the front of the table. Next to him was my birth mother, who found me when I was 29 years old after searching for a year and a half, and now we're best friends. Next to her was my stepfather that she married, not my murderer stepfather. He's dead now. Long story. I didn't kill him. Wanted to, anyway. So my adopted father, my birth mother, my stepfather loved them. My wife, first one, only one. My son, who we adopted from Canada, his birth father, we introduced them when he was a late teenager. And now my wife and I feel like grandparents. My son is our grandson, and they're the parents. I don't know how it's working. It's really weird. And my son's mother, still together, never had any other children. They are his birth parents. My sister, the one that left when she was 13 years old. To let you know how her life has gone, next to her, her son, the heroin addict, who has been in and out of treatment 100 times and can't seem to get clean, at my table. Here's where it gets weird. My wife's brother is next to him, and his husband. Told you. Now it's going to get even weirder. His daughter and her wife. Runs in the family. And then the rest of the table that went all the way around, we got some tables from the church because I don't have that big of a table. And I'm the pastor and I can do whatever I want. Were people from our community that didn't have anybody to eat Thanksgiving with. This was my table. And before we ate, we all held hands and said what we were thankful for. And then I bowed my head and I led everybody in a prayer thanking Jesus for the family that was around the table. If I can have these people at my table, how dare we tell some people that they can't be at Jesus' table? This morning I talked about peace. Part of being a peacemaker is to make sure that everyone's invited to the table. That irons out a lot. I had a church member come up to me, well, if we're letting them in and if we're inviting them to the table, doesn't that mean that we're condoning their sin? And I shouldn't have done this probably, but I said, I don't condone your sin, and you can come over to my house and eat anytime you want to. I don't condone anybody's sin. I don't even condone my own sin. I got some nasty stuff too. I watched The Bachelor. God save me. I'm not condoning anybody's sin. Jesus never condoned anybody's sin. He just said, come and sit at the table. I want to tell you about me. And that's what we're all about. Our church is to be full of people that should not be there so that we can tell them about Jesus, so that Jesus can make them into a new creation and turn them into what he wants them to be and not what you want them to be. Everybody gets a seat at Jesus' table. May we never be the older brother that thinks that somebody isn't welcome. May we never be the older brother that thinks that we have it all together. Why would we, the truth-believing people, mix with people like that? May we be like Jesus, who hangs out sometimes with the kind of people that make people worry just a little bit.